Welcome back to another episode of the Bear Trap, a Bears podcast by a Bears fan. I'm your host, Terry, and today, recapping our Week 12 victory against the New York Giants. But I got some, I just want to talk about the Bears, and real quick, I'll just kind of go through offense. As far as the grade, I give them a C+. MVP, I give that to Allen Robinson, who's a matchup nightmare all day, and like he usually is. And he makes plays when you give him a chance. As far as the defense, I give them a B+, and the MVP I'm going to give to the whole secondary. Individually, some people made some mistakes, but as a unit, I think they were the reason behind the turnaround, especially in the second half, and they gave the pass rush time to do what they could do, and I think they really are the ones that led the way for the defense. So there we go. With all that being said, I think it's time to move on from Matt Nagy. And I don't mean right now, but I mean after the season. Because I don't believe in mid-season firings unless there's some absolutely crazy situation. But it's not for the reason that most people have been saying. Because people have been saying this and all that. It has nothing to do with Trubisky. Not at all. I think some people saying, hey, you are hired to make Trubisky as good as he can be, and you didn't do that, you failed. That's stupid. The head coach's job is not to be a quarterback's coach. And so even if that's the case, that's why he was hired, then that is a dumb move on the organization. That's not really Nagy's fault. A head coach should not be responsible for any one player. And so if you want to talk about GMs tying themselves to a quarterback, fine, but not a head coach. Head coach doesn't tie themselves to a quarterback or any player. I think that's dumb. The head coach's job is to lead the collective unit and to the best place they can be. So it has nothing to do with Trubisky. I've said how I felt about Trubisky separately. I still believe that his future is elsewhere, and I think right now he's just no more than a backup who his mental fragility just really holds him back. But anyway, has nothing to do with that. The reason I've come to this conclusion is that we do have talent. We have a good amount of talent, despite what people say. We got a good amount of talent on the defense, of course, and some really good talent on offense. And a short window, as it always is. Just because I don't trust us to rebuild correctly and to continue, long history of rebuilding. So we got to strike while the iron hot. And right now I've come to realize that I've felt this way before, but we're just not organized as a team. I mean, from one coach to another, one person in football to another, you see that this team's just not organized and not prepared. And so when you're talking about barely beating a really, not superior, but a really subpar team at home, while the offense is confused on calls and there's too much noise and people don't know the play calls, like all that, it's ridiculous. When you're talking about, the silly penalties, when you're talking about all these different things, and I know that Nagy is responsible for offense and doesn't do a lot on the defensive side, trying to copy the Rams, but at the end of the day, you're held responsible. And so some people are like, oh, you got to give it time. It's only a second year. Well, the thing is, his rise to head coach was fast. We already know that. One of the youngest head coaches, or one of the youngest coaches to be named a head coach. Again, as I mentioned before, he was only coordinator for a year as a full-time coordinator. He was co-coordinator, but still, even if you give him that, that's 2 years. And so you're talking about a guy that came in as an intern, basically as a quality coach, and really shot his way up with some of his connections, which is cool and fine, but he does not have the experience. And so when you look at a head coach, and I think a lot of casual fans look at the wrong things because they're not coordinators. As a head coach, you really, to be an elite head coach, have to be able to do two things. You have to be able to adjust and you have to be able to prepare. Actually, in the backwards order, you want to be able to prepare and bring your team into a game fully ready to know what they're going to see, to fully ready to know what they're going to do in certain situations, whether it's good or bad. And then the second thing is, when things don't turn out the way you prepared them, you got to be able to adjust. Nagy has shown he's not good at those two things. And I have no reason to believe that he will become good at those two things anytime in the near future. It would be very different if you're talking about a veteran head coach or veteran coordinator. I don't even need, it has nothing to do with him being a first time head coach. It's the fact that he's just a young coach, period. And I don't mean age. I mean, he hasn't been around the block. And so there is something to say with experience, because in football or sports, really, those experiences are data. The more times you see situations, the more times you see certain coverages, the more times you see, certain offensive plays, the more times you see referees call this and that. Like, you collect data over time, and that helps make you make informed decisions. Now, again, experience isn't the only thing. You got to be able to have the type of mind to use that experience. But even if you have a good football mind, which we don't know, that lack of experience hurts you, because now when you get to these situations, you don't have the pedigree or the resume or the experience to understand what to do as the head coach. And so when you got guys that used to be, they have to, show their, earn their stripes, so to speak, as a coordinator. And after years of that and really having a solid foundation, they become head coaches. Now you're in a better seat, and you're not going to be great out the gate. It's going to take time and growing pains, just like a player, but you have that experience to lean on. And so when I look at Nagy, I look at the play calling, I look at how prepared we are to go in offensively, but then I look at, as a full team, how we act philosophically, how smart we are, how ready we are to compete. And not to say it's all bad, but I think the overall product, I don't think it's good enough, of course, as you can tell by the record. And I think some of that a lot of that falls on Matt Nagy. Now, I'm not here, as I mentioned, to say, oh, it's Matt Nagy, he's the reason. I don't care about blame. Everybody wants to point at blame like that. The fact is, as I've said before, it's everybody. But when you're talking about actionable steps to move forward to start rectifying it, my answer would be, you got to remove the coaching staff. And so for me, bringing in a veteran, which another good thing about veterans is that they can adjust. They've been able to see different schemes. So it's not like, oh, it has to be my scheme and exactly the way I want. Like, it's not a Chip Kelly type thing. I'm talking about guys that can come in and pick up what we have now and make it work and say, okay, either I could build off what Nagy had before, or I could talk with the players, figure out what they like. And that's the type of thing, whether it's a player that's a quarterback or a guy like Chuck Pagano. When you have veterans, they can come in and say, I've been around football long enough to know that this might not be the same as I ran it, or it might not have the same terminology, but I understand the concepts are similar and I can roll with it. And that's what we need. So not necessarily blow it up. I think if we were going to blow the roster up, then you might as well just keep Nagy and keep going. But I think that's just going to put us in a place where we're like the Bengals or some other teams. But if you're talking about actually trying to still use this window with the talent we have, then I think the move is to bring in another quarterback for competition, as I kind of said. Or a guy, I wouldn't say a young guy, but I bring in a guy for competition, a bridge type quarterback, and then bring in a new coach. one that you trust with the philosophy that they can bring, but not just the philosophy of, standing, no offense to Nagy, but not just standing in front of the mic saying, hey, it's about Bears football and we're going to be energetic and we're going to club dub and do all this, like actually able to then translate that into the work you do. Because again, some people keep talking about Nagy and play calling, like head coaches, that's not really the bulk of your responsibility. You're the person organizing things. So when you're talking about a Bill Belichick or any of these type of veteran coaches, Sean Payton, whatever, and they talk about, you hear players talk about how in practice they just know and go over all these situations and they're ready for things. It's because these veteran coaches have been around to know what's important. And that's the small things that casual fans don't think about. When you're even talking about how you set up practice, what you choose to practice, what you choose to focus on, all that comes from the head coach. And I just don't think Nagy's experienced enough for it. I think he needs to go back to either offensive play call or to offensive coordinator or something else and get some more years under his belt. So, again, it's nothing to do with Trubisky. It's not even necessarily to do with our numbers, right? Offensively, because we could look at last year. We can have, I'm not a prisoner of the moment. I believe Nagy knows football. I believe he knows offense, but I just don't think he's right for a head coaching role. And so after this season, that's what I would think about. And I would think about Pace as well, because as I said, he was similar, where just really young. I don't know if I trust in his ability to continue to build a roster, but I would think about it. But I would definitely move on from Nagy if you're trying to take advantage of the window we're in right now. So that's how I personally feel. As far as today, kind of the same. Like I said, you barely win against a team that's got talent, but not at all at full strength, or the team that should be able to beat you. You let them come back. It's tough. You see the offense going 3 and out. You see us shooting ourselves in the foot with penalties that we deserve. I see people crying. We deserve those penalties. And some penalties they didn't even call. And then defensively, you got Mac finally. And honestly, I never said Mac can't play, as I mentioned before, but somebody needs to say something to him, light a fire. He's getting too much money and being too valuable for him not to do what he's done today consistently. As you saw, he got a strip sack. And how did he do it? He leaned around the edge instead of just playing bully ball. And I said that for weeks. And the moment he does it, look what happens. And so it's like, Mac, I'm not sure what's going on with you, but we saw last year and we saw in Oakland, you have a number of pass rushing techniques. Stop trying to come in here and play bully ball and do one thing all game. Start mixing it up. Start turning up. Be a better pass rusher consistently. And so, thankfully, we got a little bit of that. But honestly, Leonard Floyd was getting just as good a pass rush. But overall, I already said, like, the secondary clamped down. I appreciate a lot of things that they did. But it's still the same stuff. It's still the same stuff that we struggle with. And so, overall, I've not changed once. Funny enough, I got all these people that argue with me. I've not once changed what I felt really about this team once I made a decision. I've not once really changed what I felt about Trubisky once I made a decision, or Nagy. And it's all these other people that switch week to week and yet somehow try to argue with me and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about or I don't know football. That's the funny thing. So, and tell me that they know how to evaluate. But I've been pretty consistent. I figured out what we are as a whole organization a while ago. And, I think that's just where we at. So it depends on which way we want to go. The NFC North seems to be strong. And so, they had a down year last year, but there's a lot of young talent. And so if we want to compete, we're going to have to compete. I don't think we'll be a juggernaut like we thought we would be last year. I think we're going to have to fight in the NFC because there's a lot of good teams. And so if you want to compete with this roster, then that's the route I go. If you say, hey, we're probably not going to get in that position in the next few years to be those type of teams that can go to the Super Bowl, and you want to kind of blow it up and get rid of assets and build it back, then I say keep Nagy. Why not? So anyway, that's it for me. Go to the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the conversation started. If you listen through the whole thing, put Danny Dimes in your comment. But anyways, again, thumbs up, subscribe, and remember, stay up and bear down.